If you recall, at last year's 32nd annual NALEO conference in Las Vegas, many of us were taken by surprise by the passionate and conviction with which Senator Bernie Sanders described his platform and vision for our nation's future. The whole country soon followed in our wake, and by the time we began to cast votes in primaries and caucuses earlier this year, Americans from coast to coast were feeling the burn. Over the past year of his candidacy for the Democratic nomination, Senator Sanders has attracted millions of young supporters to politics and inspired the movement that colleagues and challenges income inequality and envisions a more just society. His political revolution and his influence on policy endured even now that the hard-fought campaign for the Democratic nomination for president has nearly reached its end. Please join me in welcoming back to NALEO Annual Conference, Senator Bernie Sanders. Welcome back. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you all for inviting me for what will be brief remarks. Let me thank Michelle Martinez, your president. Let me thank Pauline Medrano, the chair of the Educational Fund, and Arturo Vargas, your executive director, for giving me the opportunity of chatting with you this morning. And let me also thank you for your service to the people in your communities and the service to the people of this country in addressing some of the major crises that we face. Today I want to chat about four major issues: the need for comprehensive immigration reform, the need for an economy that works for all people and not just the people on top, the need to fix a broken criminal justice system, and the need to address the economic crisis which is facing the people in Puerto Rico today. For more than a year, I have traveled throughout this country, and I've talked to immigrant families, particularly Latino immigrant families. And I have been moved and struck by the fear and the sadness that grips so many of them. And before I go any further, let me just say that obviously what is exacerbating that fear is the presence of Donald Trump. In this country, we are a democracy and people have the right to say whatever they want and argue for any point of view. And there are sure people here who have different points of view on many major issues. But I think given the history of this country and all that we have gone through for hundreds of years, from the time of slavery to the ugly sexism, the homophobia, the discrimination against so many of our people, whether Italians, Irish, Jews, whatever. I had hoped, and I think most Americans had hoped, that by the year 2016, maybe we would be beyond having candidates make bigotry the cornerstone of their campaigns. And I firmly believe that Donald Trump will not become president of the United States for a number of reasons. But at the top of the reasons is the fact that the American people in 2016 are not going to vote for a candidate who insults Mexicans and Latinos and Muslims and women and African Americans. Our country needs somebody who brings us together, not divides us up. During the course of the campaign, I recall being in Phoenix and talking after a speech to a half a dozen young Latinos, and tears were streaming down the eyes of some of the young people as they worried about their future and what might happen to their parents, and the fact that any day they can go home from school and find their mom or dad deported. I have talked to young people in the military. A young man serving in the United States military while on active duty, his wife was deported. And a 12-year-old boy in Arizona who we met with, who has been raised on this side of the border while his mother is on the other side, and hearing him speak is something that I will never forget. So I think it is clear to me, as that I suspect it is to all of you, that the time is long overdue for real, comprehensive immigration reform. And a path toward citizenship. And I think the next president of the United States, if Congress does not do its job, which is to pass comprehensive immigration reform, must use the executive powers of that office to do everything they can. And there are a whole lot of obvious reasons as to why we need comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship, but I'll tell you one that is not discussed all that much. And that is, as we speak today and tomorrow and the next day, there are God knows how many people in this country who are being exploited on the job every single day, who are being cheated, who are not getting fair wages, who are not getting fair working conditions. But they can't stand up and fight for their rights because their employer knows they have no rights. And that is something that has got to be addressed. So we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to end the current deportation policies. The rounding up of families that occurred last Christmas and continues to happen must end. And that means we need to provide temporary protected status to Central American families and children. The United States of America must always be about protecting vulnerable people, especially children who come to our border to escape unspeakable violence from Latin America. Let us not forget those children who arrived at our border to escape drug gang violence, horrific violence, in places like Honduras and other Central American countries. We must welcome these families and these children into this country with open arms to make certain that America continues to be a nation of hope for oppressed people all over the world. Fundamentally, we need an immigration policy which brings families together, which unites people, not divides them. A few months ago, I was at a place some of you may have visited called Friendship Park in San Diego. Anyone been there? And it's located right on the ocean. It is a beautiful location, but it is also a very sad location because it is the place where, as I understand it, every weekend they open up the gates and people are able to come to the fence. And it's a very tightly constricted fence. You can't, if your husband is on the other side, you can't hug your husband, you can't kiss your husband. You can literally put your pinky through the screen. And that is how God knows how many families literally make a connection. We have got to do better than that. And I would hope that as soon as possible, our Republicans, friends in the Congress, end their obstructionism and sit down to negotiate serious immigration reform. Further, we need, as part of the immigration issue, to end private ownership of prisons and detention centers. in America, private companies should not be making large profits through the incarceration of people in this nation. In terms of the economy, bottom line is I think all of you know that for 30 years or over 30 years, the middle class of this country has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. We have 47 million people living in poverty, an issue that the Congress or the media does not discuss very much, but it is an issue of great consequence nonetheless. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, somewhere around 21, 22%, and higher for African American and Latino families. Meanwhile, while the middle class continues to shrink and so many of our people are living in poverty, people on top are doing phenomenally well. We have more income and wealth inequality in this country today than any time since 1928. We have, and I want all of you to think about this. You're not going to see it on TV much, but you should think about it. We are living in a nation today where the top 1/10 of 1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%, where the top 20 families have more wealth than the bottom half of America, 150 million people. This is a very, very rich country. We are the richest country in the history of the world today. But most people don't know it because they are working 2, 3 jobs. They're struggling to keep their heads above water, and yet 58% of all new income generated goes to the top 1%. A lot that has to be done. I won't go into all of it, but to my mind, we need to raise the minimum wage nationally to $15 an hour. We need a massive federal jobs program which can put some 13 million people back to work by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, which makes our country more productive. We need to end the pay disparities that exist in this country between women and men. Nationally, women are making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Latino women are making considerably less than that. And I don't think it's a radical idea to say that people should receive equal pay for equal work. And what my campaign is and has been about is thinking big, not small, and asking simple questions like why it is that the United States today remains the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right, while at the same time we end up spending far, far more per capita on health care than do the people of any other country. Truth is, we have an extraordinarily wasteful, dysfunctional health care system, and today, despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, 28 million people are uninsured. Even more are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments, and we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. All right, every year, tens of thousands of people die because they don't go to the doctor when they should. That is something that we have got to end, and I would end it with a Medicare for all single-payer system. An issue that is of concern to, I think, all Americans, and I think especially the Latino community, is the issue of education. And right now, as you all know, we're living in a highly competitive global economy. We need the best educated workforce in the world. There are hundreds of thousands of bright young people today who have the capabilities and the qualifications to go to college, but they are not going to college because their families lack the funds. That is absurd. And then you got millions and millions of other people who are graduating college deeply in debt and who are having a hard time getting their lives together because they're paying a substantial part of their limited incomes in student debt. That is equally absurd. And I think what we have got to understand as a nation that investing in education and our young people is what the future of this country must be about. And that means that we have got to learn from countries like Germany, Scandinavia, and other countries, and understand that in the year 2016, it is too late to be talking about public education, meaning first grade through 12th grade. That was a great idea 30, 40 years ago. When you had a high school degree, you can go out and get a good job. Those days are by and large over. And today, the world has changed, the economy has changed, education has changed. It is not a radical idea to say that today, when we talk about public education, we have got to be talking about making public colleges and universities tuition free. And then people say, well, that's a good idea, but how are you going to pay for it? Well, we can pay for it. I have my ideas, other people may have different ideas. But that takes us back to the issue of income and wealth inequality. When so few have so much and so many have so little, it is appropriate to say to the billionaire class, to say to profitable corporations, to say to those companies who stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and in a given year pay nothing in federal taxes, to say to them, yes, you are going to start paying your fair share of taxes. Our criminal justice system is broken, and I want everybody here to know it is, again, not widely publicized. We have more people in jail than any other country on earth. Think about it. China is 4 times our size. It's a communist authoritarian country. We have more people in jail than China does. Disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American. And what I think we have got to look at is why that is the case. And there are a long list of reasons as to why that is the case. But let's start off with the fact that in inner cities throughout this country and in rural areas, you have youth unemployment. Again, an issue which is not discussed. Do you know what youth unemployment is in inner cities around this country, in certain communities? It is 30, 40, 50% for kids who have graduated high school, not dropped out. So if you graduated high school, you can't go out and get a job, and you're hanging out on a street corner, you know what? Bad things happen. And I think it makes a lot more sense as a nation for us to be investing in jobs and education for those young peoples rather than jails and incarceration. We spend $80 billion a year locking up fellow Americans. And the president recently made the point, and I've made this point many times, that for $80 billion a year, you can provide free tuition at public colleges and universities for every family in this country. So I think maybe the time is to be thinking about building colleges, making sure that our kids get the education they need, rather than building more jails. Let me say a word about Puerto Rico, and I say that because there is a major piece of legislation that will be coming to the Senate, passed the House, I think last week, 2 weeks ago. It'll be coming to the Senate, I believe, next week. In my view, it is a very bad piece of legislation. As many of you know, Puerto Rico has an unusual status, political status with the United States. It's a territory, it's a commonwealth. The 3.5 million people who live in Puerto Rico are American citizens. They can get on a plane and come to the United States, and many of them, because of the economic crisis, are doing just that. The truth is that Puerto Rico is experiencing a 10-year depression. The economic pain there is, I was there, it is really terrible. Since 2006, Puerto Rico has lost 20% of its jobs. About 60% of Puerto Rico's adult population are either unemployed or have given up looking for work. Over the past 5 years, 150 public schools have been shut down, and the childhood poverty rate in Puerto Rico is 58%. This is for American citizens. In the midst of all of this suffering, as I think many of you know, Puerto Rico has a $70 billion debt, which is unsustainable and unpayable. And what the debate going on now in Congress is how we address that issue. Bottom line is that what the legislation called the PROMESA legislation, which will be coming to the Senate, essentially says, and everybody has got to understand this, is that we are taking away virtually all of the political and democratic rights of the people of Puerto Rico. We are treating them as an absolute colony. We are saying to them that there will be a financial control board. It will be a 7-member board, and 4 of the 7 members will be Republicans. And from everything that we understand, those Republicans, those 4 members, will have unbelievable power over the budget of Puerto Rico. They will be able to cut pensions, they will be able to cut health care, they will be able to cut education. There is some discussion about even lowering the minimum wage in Puerto Rico. They are going to impose a massive austerity program on Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, in recent years, vulture funds from Wall Street have been buying up bonds in Puerto Rico. And what they have been buying them up for is pennies on the dollar, because these are risky bonds. And what they now want to do is get 100% of what the bond is worth at very, very high interest rates. So the moral issue that we are facing now is people, Wall Street vulture funds owned by billionaires, buying up bonds for a fraction of their value, and are then saying to the world, we want 100 cents on the dollar. And the way we're going to get 100 cents on the dollar is cutting health care and education and pensions and the needs of the children and working people of Puerto Rico in order to pay the vulture funds. I believe that that is not only grossly immoral, to provide Wall Street speculators with huge profits literally on the backs of the poor and the children, but it sends a horrific message to poor people all over the world as how the United States is going to address the debt crisis which exists in countries throughout the planet. So we have legislation in which moves in a very different direction than the horrific austerity program that is being placed upon the people of Puerto Rico. And again, their democratic rights, their government is literally pushed aside. This is colonialism at its worst. The United States and 4 Republicans will be taking over the island of Puerto Rico, and I would hope that every person in this room will get the word out that he or she is opposed to that legislation. All right, let me just conclude by thanking all of you for what you are doing. I think as a result of your efforts over many, many years and the efforts of many other organizations, the debate over immigration reform has substantially changed for the better. And a majority of the American people today, clearly not all, but a majority of the American people understand that we need humane immigration policies which bring us together, which unite families. And we have reached that stage because of the work that you have done. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Thank you.